Yeah, welcome very much to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program a friend of mine, and I would say a friend of the universe, or the thinking universe, we might say, and that's John Rafferty, and he's the president of the Secular Humanist Society of New York. Very interesting person, very interesting organization, and John, welcome again to Conversations.
Thank you. It's great to be back here again.
It really is. We were about to talk some war stories. We'll put that off for one night over beer or something like that. But do share your own background, if you would, personally, and then we'll get into the Secular Humanist Society and humanism in general, and this understanding the human condition.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a native New Yorker, and grew up here and went to school here right through the system, all the from elementary school through college and graduate school, all here in New York. Did my time in the Army, as we were discussing a minute ago. And I'm married to a painter, Donna Marxer, who's a wonderful, talented woman. I have 4 sons from my first marriage, and now 8 grandchildren, 4 boys, 4 girls. And I'm a relatively happy man.
Yeah, I would think so.
As
with
I
that,
approach my dotage.
Yeah, very good. Well
And,
said. Yeah.
You know, I was never much of a believer anyway. I was brought up in a fairly lackadaisical Catholic family. We didn't pay much attention to it, and so I didn't care much about it until the 1990s, when I realized that there was a change going on in America, and that there was a know-nothingism creeping in.
From the 19th century.
Right.
Yeah,
and I remember I saw a picture on the front page of the Times. I think it was on the front page, but I saw a picture in the newspaper one day in the mid-90s with 42, I believe it was, 42 senators and congressmen and women standing on the steps of the Capitol to honor the Reverend Sun Myung Moon.
Oh yes, the Unification
a lunatic,
Church. Yes,
and a tax evader,
right.
and a convict. And I thought, what is going on with the country I grew up in?
Right.
What is happening? And I started thinking about it, and I realized that I learned about evolution in the 9th grade.
Yeah, sure, of course.
And now suddenly evolution was being questioned. We had to
creationism
had to be taught next to it, and people were talking. I mean, I learned that I learned in high school that the founders of the country, who were mostly Christian, set up a secular government so that we wouldn't have the religious wars that their grandfathers
had played
fought and died in Europe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And here were these people getting airtime on television, who were in the halls of Congress saying, we're a Christian nation, we were founded as a Christian nation. Nonsense. All this nonsense.
It was coming in the mid-90s you're talking about. Yeah, right.
So then I noticed that Newt Gingrich and Pat Robertson and then
Tammy Faye Baker, or was it?
Well, no, I'm talking about the ones who were political. They were talking about these secular humanists are ruining the country. They're the reason we're in such great difficulty. And if Jerry Falwell and Newt Gingrich and Pat Robertson didn't like him, I figured I better get to know him. So somebody put me on the mailing list for the Secular Humanist Society's newsletter, Peak.
And that had been established when?
1988.
1988.
Yeah,
okay, relatively recent. Yeah.
And that was established in 1988. This was now the late 90s, and I never heard anything about it. So I got a couple of issues of the newsletter. That's interesting. And then there was a notice that a bunch of them were going to go to see the ethnologist, biologist E.O. Wilson at the 92nd Street Y.
Consilience.
Lecture on consilience. Maybe you can explain it to me, because he couldn't.
Well, it's just he's seeing a large systems understanding, and particularly of the ecology, a great ecology, and a major thinker.
I know. But at any rate, and the notice said, and some of us are going to have lunch before the Sunday afternoon lecture, and all are welcome. So, and it was in a bar near the 92nd Street Y, and so I went up, and I walked in, and I saw this table in the middle of the room with a bunch of graybeards around it. So I walked over and I said, "Is this the Misfits and Malcontents Society?" And a couple of them looked at me really strangely, but several of them really just burst out laughing.
Oh, good. Well,
and I
I'm glad
figured, okay, I'm home.
Thank God for humor. Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
So, so I got interested.
Yeah,
and
okay. Let me just ask you, university, what did you study? And so you went through university
I'm a
here in New
philosophy
York?
major.
Philosophy,
As a matter of fact, I'm very proud of the fact that I was the first philosophy major at Queens College in the city system.
Right, right.
I graduated in technically 1959. Actually, I was all finished in 50. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I had gone to the chairman of the department 2 years before and said, I want to switch my major. I want to be a philo major. We don't have philo majors. No. And I whimpered and cried and yelled and bargained, and he finally said, okay.
Philosophy.
And so I was a philosophy major. And then I won a Regents Teaching Fellowship and went to the New School for my graduate work. And finished all the graduate work, finished all the work for my MA except the thesis, which would have been a piece of cake because I'm a writer. I've been a professional
You're a really
writer.
good writer, if I may say. Your peak, I'm just going to put a plug in, that newsletter you sent out is really, really well written.
I'm glad
with
you
a
think
very well-honed humor, which I always really appreciate.
I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, right.
I've made my living as a writer all my life.
You have, okay.
Yeah, and in the advertising business and magazines and the publishing field.
So you took philosophy to get into advertising?
I got into advertising because I was teaching junior high school English and social studies while going to the New School at night. And
that was down on 12th Street?
Yep.
That part? Yeah, right.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Huh?
And but I never wrote my thesis. I never finished it because I was 26 years old. I'd been in school for exactly 20 years, and I was really sick of it.
You were, okay.
I was really just. I said that I've had enough. Regret it slightly, but not all that much.
Yeah.
But so you asked me what?
Yeah, no, I was just talking about the background and all that.
Interesting thing is, I'm now teaching a philosophy course, one I made up myself.
Autodidactically, you know that term?
Well, not actually.
I really appreciate the term autodidact.
I do too.
There's a lot of room for it
one.
now with the internet. Boy, you can just sit, you got the world before you, you can go off on anything you want to do.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm just finishing a graduate level course, a 3-year course at with the Humanist Institute. We have our last seminar weekend in April. It's 3 years, 3 long seminar weekends a year. Ton of books to read.
Yeah.
And as I say, by the Humanist Institute.
Now, the Humanist Institute and the Humanist Society, are they connected?
The Humanist Institute is connected with the American Humanist Association.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's also connected, I think it's on the campus of, but I know it's connected with the University of Minnesota.
Minnesota, that's where my daughter's teaching there at Minneapolis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
A hell of a I'm told that's a real happening place.
No question
Minneapolis
about it. It really
is a
is.
happening
It
place.
really is.
Yeah.
I've just finished this course, and when I started the course 3 years ago, I spoke to my fellow board members of the Secular Humanist Society, and I said, I think that we all ought to participate in this, and I want to be the first one, and the society ought to pay for it. It wasn't much. But I said, I want the society to be involved, and as a give back, I will turn what I learn into a course for the broader community, for our membership and for the broader community.
Right.
So just last November, I started teaching what I call Humanism 101.
Okay.
And we have a loose arrangement with the Community Church of New York.
Yeah, great institution.
Terrific
Yeah,
place
yeah.
on East 35th Street.
You're heading there tonight.
I'm going there
Yeah,
tonight. We have a book club meeting there tonight. It's a study group. Humanism 101 is a study group. I've made it very clear in the newsletter and online and on Facebook, this is not a coffee clutch, and this is not a book club, and this is not a round table. This is a study group.
Okay.
If you haven't read the books, don't come. And I got, in January, we had 24 people.
Okay, that's
and we had a terrific conversation.
What about humanism as a philosophy? Can you just really maybe quickly go over when did that come into the lexicon and existence as institutionally and so forth? And where does it fit in with the other systems of understanding about the human condition as a philosophy or as an approach to understanding the human condition?
You don't ask easy questions, do you?
Well, no, it just occurred to me, I didn't.
Okay. The word humanism has been applied to Epicurus and his philosophy of the good, pleasurable, integrated life. Many people think that Epicurean, Epicurus just means pleasure. But his idea of pleasure was the integrated life.
Investigated life, yeah.
We also ascribe the word humanism to the movement of the Italian Renaissance and then later into the English Renaissance, continental actually, of the 14th and 15th centuries, when basically associated with the Renaissance, when people started paying attention to the classical world again for the first time in a long time, and picked up the basically humanist writers. Humanism being simply not supernatural.
Right.
That's the easy way. Not supernatural. Our values come from ourselves. Our ideas are our own. We're the thinking animals who have evolved a system of ethics.
Yeah.
Now, in the United States, humanism in the United States came out of a couple of streams of thought. The transcendentalists of New England in the late 19th century, and also the ethical culture movement.
That'd be like
ethical culture
Emerson and Owen and
exactly.
There was a lot happening there in the 19th.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
And also the Ethical Culture Society.
Yes,
and ethical culture is humanism. No question about it. Humanism in America is roughly divided into two camps: religious humanism and secular humanism. Where there is, for instance, well, as I just said, ethical culture is religious humanism. It has no supreme being, but it does talk about ethics, morality, the good life, and everything else in terms of a spiritual sense and a feeling that there is a force in the universe.
Ethical culture.
Ethical culture really is.
Yeah. And you would understand.
Unitarian Universalism is also.
Yeah, that's where my family comes out.
Okay. And there is, for instance, humanistic Judaism. A lot of people, a lot of humanistic Jews all over America. Who else? That's even some group has started up a Christian.
A knock on wood society?
Knock on wood.
Evangelical.
Evangelical humanism. Doesn't make sense to me. Mine is, the area that I'm in is secular humanism. That simply say, well,
you got A for
A for atheism. I got this. Get this off the off Richard Dawkins'
you like
website.
Dawkins. Yeah, Dawkins is a power. Yeah.
Atheism.
Bill Maher, maybe on a comic vein. Yeah.
Atheism, as a lot of atheists have said, is not a belief; it's a conclusion. And I've come to that conclusion. But that's just a starting point.
Okay.
How do you live your life?
Yeah, right.
And to me, humanism makes the most sense. Humanism is a philosophy, is an ethical philosophy, a way of life that's based on science and reason and democracy and the value and individual worth, the value and worth of the individual human being.
Yeah, you spoke of the Renaissance. There was also the Enlightenment. And so Enlightenment, and what's happening is that we're coming to understand things in a secular or in a non-absolutist kind of way, which I don't think has been the luxury of humanity. We've been here 200,000 years as a species. And for a lot of that period, we were born with a sense of self-reflective consciousness that could ask the larger issues. We had some explanation for it, unlike a lot of the creatures that just live embedded in the environment. But so we're coming to understand it more and more. So we had to have some sort of an understanding, and we had to repair to these creation stories in order to fulfill that need of having that self-reflective consciousness. But as we come to understand things more and more in real terms, ideal, secular, intellectual terms, we're getting. I think that's the trend of the future. Is that we can understand things much more than we were born in the ignorant condition out of which we're emerging. Yeah, well, and it's a process that's continuing.
Yeah. Well, as you say, we're born with them. We have a growing body of evidence from biological and neurological testing that indicates that our sense of right and wrong, our sense of morality, our sense of ethics, is part of our evolutionary history. That our closest, that not only our closest relatives in terms of evolution, like the chimpanzees and the bonobos, that they have a sense of right and wrong. But even people, there have been studies done with lesser primates, even with dogs. Dogs who will refuse to play a game if it's rigged. They will play along. You know, this dog gets a treat for doing the thing right, and this one gets the treat. And then when this dog does the trick right, but the treat is withheld, if that's done a few times, the other dog stops playing. I
got a dog, and I'll tell you, he runs our place. I tell you like that, along with the cats. They have a different kind of take on things.
We find not only cooperative behavior, but we find a sense of right and wrong in a great many animals. And now that's where we get it from. And we've developed it. I just finished reading a fascinating book by a friend and philosopher named Massimo Pigliucci, Answers for Aristotle.
That's the one you're going to be discussing tonight.
We're going to be discussing tonight.
Yeah, good for you.
And I just finished reading it yesterday. And Massimo points out a number of these. He illustrates a number of these experiments, and points out how we have become an ethical animal, and this is perhaps the best thing we as a species have ever done. Developed a concept of right and wrong, developed a concept of ethics. Now, we've done it.
Well, that's going back.
But the fundamentalists, the authoritarians would say, you can't have ethics without a supreme being.
Well, some overarching absolutist thing that answers the big questions that we're coming to understand better through the evolutionary process.
Exactly right.
You know, we're coming to understand the universe in ways that could not have been done 100,000 years ago or something like that. And so it's really interesting like that. And humanism really, secular humanism, or understanding in an intellectual sense, that is interesting, and we want to get into that. We got a lot. We want to talk about Pi Day and other kinds of things. But it's interesting. You got this society and it's operating. But also, we're in television here, and I wonder if we could just indulge me a minute or something. We're in television, and I was talking to you about the educational potentiality of television, particularly these graphics and so forth now. And I'd mentioned to you that there was a thing that they had on the History Channel. We got 1,996 channels of television capability on a cable
And I'm
system
glad you
in New
told me
York.
about it.
And it's a source of great educational potential, including one would hope, we'd like to enlist you at MNN if we could to come in with some humanist track of thinking to help education, because the educational process and the autodidactic learning of people who are curious is becoming richer and richer and richer all the time. Well, they had on the History Channel, they had a program that I was so intrigued with, and I took it off the air. It was called The History of the World in 2 hours. They were going to give the history of the world in 2 hours. And we have just a little clip of that. It's about a 40-second clip that goes through the history of what they're going to do. And the factual basis, like markers in understanding the genome, you have markers. So the markers are the facts that come up based upon understanding that's evolving with increasing clarity, the reality of
Right.
how things came to be and so forth, all seem to hold. And so maybe we could run that little clip if
I'd
you
love
don't
to see
mind.
it.
It's a little clip. It runs about 40 seconds off the History Channel, and maybe we could set that up and run that now then, please, and then we'll come back. We're talking with John Rafferty.
Okay.
We're going to tell the whole story, from the Big Bang to the present day. How the planet prepared for the rise of man. How the Stone Age led to the steam engine. How the first seeds sprouted into cities and civilizations. Everything is connected, and the path leads to you. It took history 13.7 billion years to unfold. We'll show you everything you need to know in the next 2 hours.
Okay, that's the thing. I recommend it very heartily because,
It looks
again,
fascinating.
the markers that they have and the graphics that they have, how they can educate it. I think this little piece would do well to be showing to every 8th grader in the world, because it gives a secularly or an indication other than the creation stories that have
Right.
been given a sense of meaning and purpose and ethics to so much of the world, that I think the thing that's on the rise really is secular humanism,
I hope
where
so.
these things are being put within a scientific understanding, a new enlightenment that's dawning on the
I
on
think
the
so
planet.
too. And it's not just an opinion.
Yeah.
In 1990, Pew Research pointed out that there were 12% of the American public, American adults, did not have any religion. They recorded none, N-O-N-E, as their religious identification. In 2000, that was up to 16%.
From 12 to 16.
Yes.
Yeah,
And in 2012,
Uh-huh.
it was up to 20%.
That's a fast
20%
growth,
of
yeah.
American adults have no religious affiliation.
Well, what
that
about-
doesn't mean they're all atheists,
Right,
not
right.
at all,
No.
or humanists, but it means they're not going to church.
But it's not only church. I mean, that's one thing. Secular, it indicates, you understand things. But you could also become a religiously, almost religio, I mean, held to, or
Yeah,
bound by,
right.
or that sort of thing. You could become, by any absolutist kind of understanding, like a rock-ribbed Republican, you think that that's an overriding issue. There's an overriding understanding. It isn't just religion. It's also there are communists who think that a communist thing of Karl Marx, or something that is more than the normally accepted way in which we get the news, an overarching absolutist thing that answers things, that trumps all the other kinds of hard-won intellectual understandings that's been evolving, if you understand what I mean. So it's not only religion, it's any absolutist. It seems the universe is synergetic. It's the behavior of systems unpredicted by the sum of its parts. There's something resonatingly more through time that emerges as the evolutionary process ends up beginning from as they say in the piece, 13.7 billion years ago, the universe began. All the creation, all the elements had to be created and all that sort of thing. And now we can understand that. And now humanity's been here 200,000 years. We're all Africans. We can begin to understand this in reality, 10,000 generations. And it may well be that this generation, it's hard to believe, but this generation may be the defining generation in evolutionary terms, not just political terms that makes up most all of the news. But this is a time of absolutely qualitative transformation as the extended technology begins to have an effect both in terms of weaponry and also in terms of our understanding, which is bringing in a new era, perhaps evolutionarily, in the evolution of universal consciousness. And so what a time to be born into, but it calls for intellectual understanding that is based upon the evolving collective capability of understanding the human condition within the larger universal context. Perhaps, and it calls for a thing like something other than absolutism, because that condition would be a resonancy more than the sum of the parts of a fulfilled system.
Yeah.
Evolutionarily, it can be understood. If you understand what I mean.
I think I do. And it fits in with my own philosophy of life, because we are contingent, and we are not. There are no absolute answers.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying.
They're just
we would like to have, and it's reassuring. You
Right.
know, we're going to see people who've passed in an afterlife and things like that. That anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. And humanism is a philosophy in one sense of contingency. It deals with the problems that we see right in front of us today, not in some afterlife, not in some wacko story of creation that makes no sense. I mean, none of them do.
But it makes a lot of sense, or it has a lot of meaning to a whole lot of the human population coming out of history.
But fewer as a percentage than in the past.
Was that for the United States or New York City or East Village of New York City, or was that for the world?
States.
That was the United States.
That's the Pew Center for the something of religion in America. It's I don't remember. They're very good, and there is no doubt about it. And by the way, as I said, 20% of adults, when you take it from ages 18 to 29, it's 25%.
It's higher, right? So that's an emerging, it seems to me that's an emerging thing. The Pope just resigned, not only for physical reasons, but also they're in deep trouble. And it's not only that, it's also, if I may, the political institutions that have evolved. The reify. You reify outdated institutions. It's built into the architecture. It's built into the institutional structure, certain thoughts and all that kind of thing. We're reifying those institutions out of history, which have been at a level of capability or a latent capability of the collective knowledge and so forth is being transcended evolutionarily. That's the way things develop new. You have a steady state. You're in a steady state for a long period of time, perhaps millions of years, and then there's what's called punctuated equilibrium. You know, Stephen Jay Gould, Niles Eldridge, and then the new appears. So you come to the end of that. It's an evolutionary process that's characteristic of the whole history of everything, as they said, everything from 13.7 billion years ago, and we may be coming to, what I'm getting at is we may be coming to a liberated order that is inherent in our technological extended capability. At the same time, we got weapon systems that is a Damoclean sword possibility that are, to use the current term, species lethal since about 1970. We're born into a period of absolutely incredible transformation evolutionarily. We're coming into a new relationship to the cosmos that we have been able to be in through 200,000 years of human existence. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. But while I agree with you, but while we have not learned to work out our relationships with each other, as in terms of the various ethnic groups on the face of the planet.
That's right.
And while I can talk about the rise of the nuns in America and the gradual loosening. By the way, while everybody
Yeah,
thinks...
you come out of
yeah.
Catholic tradition. You come out of a Catholic tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
loose,
yeah,
loose. You said, yeah, okay.
As a matter of fact, I've put in a job application to go back to it.
Oh, really?
You didn't read it?
No. Oh, you did. You did have an application. Now that the Pope has resigned,
Right.
And in fact, he publishes a thing called Peak. I think you know.
Peak is
and it's a newsletter.
Peak is the newsletter of
Yeah.
the Secular Humanist
we show
Society
that? Yeah.
of New York, and I suppose you'll cut in.
Can you
on
cut
it.
in? Yeah, give him a chance to.
There we
scroll it.
go.
Yeah,
It's the newsletter of the Secular Humanist Society in New
edited
York.
by a
It's out
guy
every
named
month.
John Rafferty.
John Rafferty.
Does a magnificent job
And,
with a cutting-edge sense of humor.
Anybody who wants a free, no obligation, short-term subscription can just email editor@shsny.org.
And as I understand,
Thank you for
put
the
in a
opening.
job application for Pope, right?
My job
Yeah,
application.
Okay, let's let him read it, ladies
Okay.
and gentlemen. Okay.
To the College of Cardinals, Vatican City. From John Rafferty. Subject, job application. Since the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church in Rome will shortly be without a Bishop of Rome and Vicar of Christ in the apostolic succession, and he has already resigned, I wrote this a couple of weeks ago, I offer myself to the College of Cardinals.
Pope Rafferty.
John the 24th. My qualifications. I was baptized in the faith and made my first Holy Communion at the traditional age of 7. And while I have been, let's call it irregular, in my church attendance, since being confirmed a soldier of Christ at age 12, I do have other qualifications that seem requisite for the job. I am male, Caucasian, old, close enough to natural celibacy as to make no never mind to the church, and can swear I have never laid hands on an altar boy. I am rigidly set in my ways and have dogmatic, unalterable opinions about birth control, abortion, women in the priesthood, and the above-mentioned celibacy. I also already consider myself generally infallible. Although, unlike my predecessor, I am fluent only in English, I do speak passable tourist French and some New York Spanglish, Bodiga, Cuchifritos, Jennifer Lopez, and I'm willing to study Latin. Living in Rome is fine with me, especially the Italian food everyday part, and I have no problem with all the travel the job obviously requires, as long as I get that Pope plane and the cool white car. In fact, I've started to prepare a first papal world tour list of several important centers of Catholic worship that my predecessor missed in his travels. Cancun, Las Vegas, and a nature beach I know on St. Kitts. I also have some marketing ideas about official tour T-shirts, caps, and coffee mugs. If my atheism is a deal breaker, I am willing to recant. In fact, you might consider that my abnegation on bloody knees in St. Peter's Square would make great worldwide TV, probably delivering a 60 share globally. Finally, don't forget I am already named John. Very truly yours, John the 24th Rafferty. P.S. My wife, like dozens of papal wives and mistresses in history, promises to stay out of the public eye, or at least to not make her opinions of the church public, and to not make public fun of me wearing a white dress.
Okay, well, I don't know. You're throwing your hat into the ring, Scott Consular.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's going to throw his hat into the
You
ring.
know, I feel the same way that George Carlin did.
Yeah, Carlin was genius.
Well,
I
as he
loved
said,
Carlin.
I have as much authority as the Pope.
Yeah.
I just don't have as many people believe it.
Right. Listen, that's really funny, and that's the thing. The newsletters. Now, maybe you could help, because one of the tyrannies of the world in which we live is the time. We have a time limit. We've only got an hour. We could talk for 25 with a drop of a hat. But I wonder if maybe you could go to the back of Peak, and you've got a thing that maybe be what they call in the business of television a segue, and read there, if you can, the thing on about Pi Day, if you
Okay.
could, because that's something that we want to do. We got another
Right.
thing that we want to show.
From modest beginnings at the San Francisco Exploratorium in 1989, Pi Day celebrations have spread to college campuses all across the country. Pi Day is March 14th, 3/14 in the month day format,
Right.
and it's the only holiday we have that celebrates math and science.
Right.
So why not celebrate it with a triangular piece of pie?
All right.
In fact, why not have that pie? I'll take blueberry at the end of a late lunch, say at almost 2 p.m. Because pi is 314
Right.
159.
Right. That's right.
So 2
okay.
p.m.
Oh, I see. I got it. And then there's another thing.
And one more reason to celebrate. March 14th is also the birthday of Albert Einstein.
Yes, it would be.
Happy 134th, Albie.
Yes, right. And it would be good to have something in our holiday season other than generals and people who've led political campaigns and whatnot. Somebody who represents the intellectual community, particularly in a secular humanist way. And it happens to be that that's his birthday.
It is.
The 314 comes out. It's the pi is the circumference to the diameter of a circle that's worked out and goes on infinitely and so forth. And it's now, as I understand it, I've been looking it up, it's being touted, particularly at universities, across the world. They're trying to make a movement to get some real attention to this idea of Pi Day because it would celebrate Albert Einstein, and it would also celebrate the secular or intellectual coming to understand the world increasingly, which I think conflates nicely with secular humanism.
It does.
So it would be something, intellectual or enlightened understanding of the evolutionary process.
Right. And what we were just talking about a minute ago, the concept of pi fits in so well because it drove people nuts that
they couldn't get an answer.
They cannot get an absolute
It's synergetic.
It goes on forever.
It does.
It's contingent.
Yeah, they can do that. So that's true. So that goes back to my saying it's synergetic, and there may be a consciousness inherent in the evolutionary process to that which we've been as a species for 200,000 years, just turning the corner now as we come into an era of incredible qualitative evolutionary transformation of the human condition, not only on the weaponry side as one, the other side is we have a technologically oriented capability of providing for all of the human society within an ecological context that could be truly liberating, that we simply have never been able to have coming out of a historical condition of scarcity. So we may be transcending that. And so Pi Day might be a good thing to celebrate. And I don't want to make any big point of it. I used to lobby for that back in Washington when I was in Washington doing senators and whatnot, because March 14th is Albert Einstein's birthday. This program will air on March 14th, 2013. And it also happens to be my birthday, March 14th.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, it's my birthday, and I would like to see all the kiddies get out of school so we could all hopscotch down and get an ice cream cone and learn something.
Have a piece of pie.
Add a piece of pie on top of it. But anyway, we do have one thing, again, we have another clip, and this is a clip that was done about Pi Day. And also I got some things we can show after that, but we've got a clip. It runs about 2 or 3 minutes or something like that. It's in a rap song, and it's we got that, I hope, cued. And maybe we could play that because it talks about pi and sets this up. This day of celebration that is spreading rapidly around the world in intellectual circles and expanding. So maybe we could play that tape or that piece of video footage now.
Check the vibe.
Pi is a letter of the Greek alphabet, but it's also a number as a matter of fact. 3.14159. It'll keep going if you've got time. The Energizer Bunny won't repeat, it won't stop. Pi is irrational, but it's risen to the top of math, science, geometry. It's been around since 2000 BC.
Walk like an Egyptian.
Egypt it was written on the papyrus. Then in Greece a man from Syracuse, Archimedes, in 250 BC, guesstimated pi's decimal, although he knew that was impossible. Now mathematicians in every space calculate 2 more decimal places. Ptolemy, Fibonacci, even Newton all had pi on their minds. 3.141592653589979. But pi, what it is, it's a ratio. That's a fraction, y'all, if you don't know. It's a constant in a circle, equal in all circumference to diameter. But why do we care? What's its use? What's it for? In circles it's easy. It's been found perimeter, that's the distance around, is pi times 2 times the radius. That's all, come on, let's get serious. Area is pi times the radius squared. In the math that we call trigonometry, the sine and the tangent and the cosine you see of the same sine 5 degrees, and all their multiples all rely on that number, on that ratio that we all call pi. 3.14159.
Okay. Happy Pi Day, John. Happy Pi Day.
Yeah,
Happy
indeed.
Pi Day to you,
And
the
happy
audience.
birthday
This
to you.
program is airing on Pi Day. It's spreading around the world, particularly in, I guess, intellectual circles and that kind of thing. But I think it's a good idea that we have a national holiday dedicated to intellectual understanding rather than all the military history coming out of military heroes coming out of history. And it's also spreading here into other circles too. March 14th. There's a resolution here. I could show here. Maybe we can come in on it, Dijon, if you can. If we hold up a graphic, this is a thing. This is a thing from March 9, 2009, in the House of Representatives of the United States of America. Can you come up on this, or where should I direct it? At my camera? Can you come up on this? It just shows House Resolution such and such. And it says it is declaring favorably, and it's got the, I don't want to read it all, but it reads out the reasons to declare Pi Day as a significant day in terms of the ordering of holidays and recognition in the United States. That's by the United States Congress, and again, it's happening in many intellectual circles, this Pi Day thing. What do you think, John? Do you think it's a good idea for us to get behind and lobby for this Pi Day concept? I'm all for it. It's got a synergistic quality and so forth.
Well, yes, but you know, I'm working on another not a holiday, but another recognition at the same time.
Yeah.
A Day of Reason. And are you? Do you know the Center for Inquiry? New York City?
No, I don't think I do. No, I don't. Fill me
Center
in.
for Inquiry is associated with the Council for Secular Humanism, and they're all over the world.
Yeah.
Center for Inquiry, and here in New York, the Center for Inquiry and the Secular Humanist Society of New York are starting a campaign to get the New York City Council to proclaim a Day of Reason. As we have a day of prayer. We have a National Day of Prayer. Which the extreme right wing has taken over. If you go to that, website, you find out very quickly that unless you're an evangelical Protestant, you're not allowed to speak at any of those functions and all. At any rate,
that's pretty closed-minded. Sounds to me.
It's
sounds
terrible.
Inquisition.
Absolutely terrible.
Well, anyway,
it's Phyllis Schlafly and the whole bunch of nonsense.
Yeah, the part of Tea Party, maybe?
Right. Yeah, well,
I think political, yeah.
I think further right than the Tea Party.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Even at any rate, what we're just starting a campaign to get the city council to proclaim a day of reason in the first Thursday in May. We're hoping we can get them going this year, but I doubt it because this is an election year for the local politicians. We elect a mayor and a city council this year, and a lot of them are going to run away from something like this.
Yeah,
They'd
because
be afraid
it's not
of it.
popular. Because because one ought to understand in a certain sense, if you're talking about a qualitative change, one ought to be very, very careful in a certain sense, because the institutions that have evolved have a great deal of meaning to a great number of people, whether it's correct or it's destined for a clash with the future evolving understanding or something. But it has a great deal of meaning for a whole lot of people at the core of by the means by which they gain a sense of identity.
No question.
And if you're questioning something or asking them to question something basic to themselves, their own sense of identity, it's very, very difficult for somebody to just jump into the void of lack of understanding. And we ought to be appreciative of that, it seems to me. And there ought to be up on that table room for there to be an involvement of everybody in some way. So we're going to have to be a little bit careful about not getting overly authoritarian or overly, thing like that, to just deride the people who get a sense of identity. And after all, also, I think about it often, like I think in terms of economics. We need a new liberated economics, but the system that works. And it does work, and it's tried and true in its very real sense. So the institutions and the institutional thought patterns and these kind of things do have an important role to play in terms of the ongoing nature of society. So the too abrupt a change is not something that we could expect appropriately to be characteristic of the whole of the human condition, and we ought to be respectful of the fact that other people's ideas and thoughts we should pay attention to, include them in the pattern. That would include even a political leadership that despite all the money that goes, all the horses and all the king's men, of all the trillions of dollars that goes into economic planning and education and all these things, they still have not, collectively, humanity, come up with what would be called like an operating manual for spaceship Earth relevant to the emerging new reality. The intellectual community hasn't either. So we're all in a play, and we got to have something that can be inclusive of everybody, which includes those responsible for the inherited institutions, if you know what I mean. Some of those are religious, some of those are political, some are those. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, and I hope I didn't give you the wrong impression when I say we want to have a day of reason.
Yeah.
We're not asking anybody to drop a day of prayer. We're not proselytizing.
Okay.
I still live by the rallying cry from the 60s. Whatever gets you through the night. If religion is your thing, if belief is your thing, wonderful. Wonderful. Go with your God. That's fine.
But you understand what happens in a dialectic.
If
you get too
it's
strung
coming
up.
from the other direction, Harold. They're the ones,
Okay.
the religious right are the ones who are telling us, you non-believers have no place at the table. We're we don't have a problem with that. I'm not trying to convince anybody not to believe. That's nonsense. I don't want that. But I do want you not to be able to put your nonsense in my grandchildren's school curriculum.
Well, that's right. Go to Texas and talk to the Texas School Board. They set the pattern for the textbooks and all that. Yeah, but I'm just sort of saying in a certain sense it's a lot of people are going to claim that reason is on their side. Look at what we've got going in the Congress of the United States now. I mean, they've got a dysfunctionality that is almost hard. And they're both saying, we have, and remember the First World War? And everything, and remember the history of the world? Everybody had a belt, Gott mit uns. Everybody's saying God or the reason or whatever criteria you want to have for giving identity and so forth is on their side against the people who are not. Right. And look at the dissension that's going on between all the various claims by various groups to having truth on their side.
Right.
It's a big claim, and yet truth is probably pretty eclectic in its synergistic resonancy of including everybody. I'm just saying, you understand what I'm
I
saying?
think I do.
Yeah.
And I never claim to. I think most humanists don't claim truth. We don't claim truth. We claim contingent truth, that this is what we know now. For instance, evolution.
Yeah.
We know more than we did 50 years ago.
Or
we know
200.
more than we did 10 years ago.
Or 200 years
Yeah,
ago.
so
Think in those terms. Yeah.
We change, but
Yeah.
we don't say this is what we know about evolution right now, and that's what it is for all time. We learn more, and we change our opinions. We learn and go back to your point about economics. As we learn more, we are living in a society today. We were talking about robotics before. We were talking about
Amazing.
Which
Yeah.
we couldn't have conceived.
I know.
40 or
20
50
years ago even, yeah.
And so the world has changed.
Yeah, right.
And so we have to think about it in a different way. And from the point of view of philosophy and of ethics, that's where my people, the humanists, stand. As things change, we change, and we change the world, and we change our ideas, and we have no problem with that.
Yeah, it's called they had the Enlightenment after all.
One of our members got a letter from his cousin, who was a congressman, by the way, and he said, "You have no idea of the immensity of God's infinity."
Yeah.
And when I read that, I said, this guy comes at it from that point of view, but where did infinity come from? It's our idea. We're the ones who conceived it. We thought it up, and we can think up anything.
But we've only been here, we're just a blip in evolutionary terms. We've only been here 200,000 years, and the universe has been existing apparently 13.7 billion years.
But by the way,
and it had to go all that time. It all had to be created, and then how in the heck did it all get going?
Isn't it possible that there is no such thing as infinity?
Well, okay, that's another
But we
thing.
thought it up.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is
what are you
we're
saying?
capable of changing it. And you said a little while ago that maybe we're at the point where we are making the universe itself sentient.
George Gordon Child wrote it, Man
That's
Makes
what I'm
Himself.
saying.
And also they've written, and what we have, it seems to me, just understanding things in we have a unique capability in the evolutionary process. I mean, there's all the 99.999% of all the species that have ever existed in evolution have gone extinct. Yeah. That's something to think about. And we've come up along the line. In 1962, we were very close, and we have a unique capability, it seems to me. I mean, everything is related, as Mr. Consilience, Mr. Wilson would tell you. Everything is a contribution, and there's an ecological quality to everything. Everything's from elected Gaia principle, John Lovelock and that. But we have a unique capability of not only having a self-reflective consciousness that can ask the larger issues, which come up with the creation stories and so forth over the all of time and all that. But we also have a unique capability of extending our consciousness into the environment through tools and technology, making the world other than, in an Eden-like sense, is the way in which most creatures are embedded in the natural order. Okay? So we can make the world different. Big difference between wandering around finding a cave you can shelter in and building a house with a furnace and an air conditioner and so forth. So we have this ability to do that, and we've reached a point where existentially that extended consciousness can apparently, from the modeling, this is something that should be on the minds of everybody, since about 1970, has become species lethal. They have the ability with the weapons that exist, not inflection points of thought or something like 1905 or something. But they have weapon systems that, if they were to be unleashed in a spasm of hatred, which has been very regular in our history, would wipe out the entire Homo sapiens species.
Yes.
They could stop conscious evolution in the universe.
Yeah.
If we are apexing that. On the other hand, we have a capability of it, and instead of having all the unjust systems where you've had a few people at all the power in the more recent, few thousand years since the Neolithic, and then everybody else like serfs wallowing around in the mud, we could have a liberation of the whole order of the humanity. Everybody could be liberated to where materially, and they could be. And then that could be included within an ecological context. And then that could be something that would be including the people who are responsible for the outdated institutions, as well as the vast majority of people who've never been able to realize their full potential. We may be at a moment of jump up time, jubilee, end of time, liberation at the end of a process that's just beginning to dawn as being characteristic of the very time in which we talk now.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
I think I do.
Do you feel that at all? That we're
Yes, I
in that
do.
kind of a
Yes,
time,
I
and
do.
it's hard to think that why should we, our generation, be the one born into such a moment of qualitative evolutionary transformation in the order of the evolution of universal consciousness?
I think the why there is not relevant.
Okay.
That indicates there's some sort of agency.
It's
what it is.
Yeah.
That's all. It is what is.
Ah.
And that does not, what is in Kantian terms is not what ought to
Emmanuel.
be. So it's the why. I go along with you all the way until you ask the question, why?
Oh, you would bring up that, and one of the tyrannies we have again this time. Johnny, thank
Okay,
you for
good.
coming in. John
I'm glad.
Rafferty, ladies and gentlemen, president
My
of the
pleasure.
Humanist Society of New York, and also, once more time, let's just say Happy Pi Day.
Happy
I'm
Pi
ready
Day.
to be a crusader for Pi Day as a way that can help us usher into this period where we can realize the larger things. And one thing is, it seems, whether we like it or not, being older, you and I, these kids coming along with these computers and everything, and the evolution, it's just going exponentially now, the capability, and it seems to have a mind of its own, or something, or a process that it doesn't make us do any good to say, stop the world, I want to get off.
We
It's been the
can't.
want of old folks
we
over
can't
the
do
ages.
that.
We can't do
it's
that.
time for us to get out of the way.
It's time for us to maybe move and start thinking about it's time to leave the womb of of which we're coming. We're coming full term. It was a 7-month thing when we did the Declaration of Independence. We're coming full term, and it's time to leave the womb. So, Happy Pi Day, one and all.
Happy Pi Day indeed,
March
and
14th,
happy Harold
you heard
Day.
it here first. Okay. Thank you very much, and I guess we could just chat here for a little bit more. So you're going to go down and read teach this course tonight.
Right. Answers
That'd
for
be-
Aristotle,
That's
yes.
the 7th, so that
Yeah.
will have passed. Sorry, that was an advance notice that doesn't work. So anyway, Happy Pi Day, one and all.
Yeah.
And thanks again, John, for coming.
My
Great
pleasure to be here.
And thanks for Dejan and Melanie for helping put this together.